Hey guys, welcome to week 4 vlog. This week we were looking at biogas and landfill gas utilization. So I want to jump on that and talk a little bit more about kind of the energy systems integration piece of waste with two topics that are related. One is carbon capture and utilization, and the other is hydrogen. So we talked about how in greenhouse gas accounting, biogenic carbon, we don't count the emissions for the same way we account fossil emissions. And that's because theoretically, those biogenic cycles are sustainable and will continue, whereas fossil fuels need to stay in the ground. So that assumption that carbon's going to be captured again really soon, it doesn't automatically happen, but we assume that in the accounting anyway. But even if those emissions don't count, it still would be better to keep them and do something with them and not emit them. So it's the same CO2 we'd be saving. And on the accounting side, it'd be zero emissions either way, but maybe you'd be able to generate some offsets for even not putting out your emissions that don't count. So this isn't really done in the waste industry that much yet because of that reason, because those biogenic emissions don't count. But there may be ways in the future where that can be monetized and incentivized with offset protocols for capturing biogenic carbon from waste products. Now, what do you do with that carbon? So there's been a lot of talk about carbon capture and sequestration, which is finding somewhere to pump it underground and hope it stays under there. There's been a lot of research recently and practice actually with using carbon capture to push more oil out of the ground in unconventional oil production, which is really funny to me, putting its carbon capture and oil production at the same time. The greenhouse gas accounting comes out as negative, is the claim. So it's overall good to keep producing oil that way, but it just seems funny given all the other options we have. So that's carbon capture and sequestration. In Ontario, actually, in southern Ontario, we're on all this limestone rock that is theoretically suitable for doing carbon capture and sequestration. And there have been some studies that looked at locations that you could inject carbon, but nothing big has been developed yet, or nothing at all that I've heard of anyway. So carbon capture and sequestration is kind of a hard one that's not too uptaken, at least here yet. It might be a bit of a pipe dream. It's definitely not a silver bullet for climate change. Carbon capture and utilization is a little bit of a different concept. So instead of just pumping it underground, we want to do something more useful with that carbon than just get rid of it. We're essentially treating it like a waste by doing carbon capture and sequestration. And according to the waste hierarchy, if we could do something better with it, that'd be a more efficient use of it. I'll share this article with you about carbon capture and utilization, and it's part of a series on all sorts of different carbon capture topics that's really good to check out. And just to highlight two of the interesting uses in here are for building materials that are traditionally very high carbon intensity, concrete and steel. And all our buildings are made of concrete and steel. And if you look at any greenhouse gas inventory, these are some of the biggest emitters, single emitters of carbon in any industrial country. So concrete, interestingly, you can actually cure with carbon dioxide. So it will get reintegrated back into the mineral structure of the concrete. And this also has strength benefits for the concrete. So we're making a better material that stores more carbon in it. So that's pretty cool. And then steel, in steel making, you use carbon. So it inherently has a lot of emissions as well. But an alternative to steel might be carbon fiber. And we've been seeing more research into carbon fiber and graphene and carbon fiber power lines and things like this. So in the future, carbon fiber might be more of a alternative building material that we might use. Because carbon is interesting because a byproduct, if you look at methane, which we get in biogas and landfill gas, if you chop off the carbon, you get two hydrogens. And that's where I'm going next about hydrogen. But then you have this one carbon left over. So it's actually a lot easier to sequester carbon if you have it in its solid form versus in its gas form, CO2. And there are some technologies that actually produce solid graphite as the way that carbon is sequestered and then separate off the hydrogen. And then that carbon could be used for like carbon fiber building materials. So hydrogen is interesting because we can chop off the carbon from our methane from biogas or landfill gas and then do something with it, hopefully use it in a useful way. And then our hydrogen is a portable form of energy that when it's actually burned, then we have no emissions for. So the nice thing about electricity is it's really easy to decarbonize, but it's hard to put in mobile sources. Like electric cars have limited range and you need charging stations and stuff like that. Where gasoline is really nice because all the energy is self-contained, it's quick to fuel and things like that. So hydrogen has a lot of those benefits, but without the carbon. So the key thing is making sure that you manage that carbon from the hydrogen and not just have it going up into the atmosphere. So in the article I'm sharing here is all about like the hydrogen transition and how to make it environmentally friendly. Right now, most of the hydrogen we produce, we just chop off the carbon and send it out as carbon dioxide, and is normally produced from petroleum feedstock. So we're really just turning oil into a different form, and we're still emitting that carbon. That's called gray carbon. There's two other colors of carbon. Blue carbon is fossil fuel sourced hydrogen, but the carbon is sequestered and put back into the ground. And then green carbon is actually not produced from petroleum at all. It's produced from renewable resources. So either it could be from electricity, electrolyzing water, and then you actually get hydrogen and pure oxygen, which is something else you can sell. Or you can take biogas or landfill gas and apply a similar technology that you'd apply to petroleum to chop off that carbon and get the hydrogen out of it. So yeah, the way that waste to energy from landfill gas and biogas right now, it's still emitting a lot of CO2 if we're just burning the methane. But in the future, we might do a better job of decarbonizing it by capturing some of that methane and sending the energy off as hydrogen instead of methane into the world. And just my last thought, we've talked about renewable natural gas and how it's good to put this gas made from our waste into the pipelines to keep fossil fuels in the ground and keep them out of the pipelines. So you can further improve this by displacing some of that methane with hydrogen. Now you can't put a lot of hydrogen in the pipelines because they still need to work in our natural gas appliances and in our pipes that are built to be for natural gas, but you can put some in, and there's experimentation with different levels. In Ontario, in Markham, there's a pilot project where there's a neighborhood that has 2% hydrogen being blended in with their natural gas. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but hydrogen has a higher energy content than natural gas. So it punches a little bit above its weight, and you can imagine if our whole natural gas grid had a little bit of an emissions reduction, it adds up to many tons of emission savings. So that's something else that's going on, both putting our RNG with the carbon emissions that don't count in the grid, as well as putting hydrogen, which actually has no emissions, into the grid. And these are just a few of the many ways that we're working on climate change and emission savings. But just for my very last thought, I really like the energy hierarchy because it's just like the waste hierarchy. It really focuses on, instead of having like renewable energy systems, saving our energy in the first place. So that's something that's less talked about. I think it's something that deserves more attention as well. And maybe as we get more serious about climate change and saving emissions, we'll start hearing about working higher up that energy hierarchy. So just some things to think about for this week. I'll put these links for these articles. You can check them all out, and I'll see you soon.